Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. Organizing a Christmas party in 2021 felt like a much-needed breath from that year's chaos. Between online classes, the part-time job, and the general feeling of gloom that covered everything, I was ready for a bit of holiday spirit, so I decided to invite a few people to my place in Knoxville. Just close friends, festive music, and plenty of eggnog. The night started perfectly. People arrived little by little in ridiculous Christmas sweaters, arms loaded with snacks and gifts. My friend Alex took over the console and played DJ, dropping seasonal classics with a few pop hits mixed in. The living room smelled like cinnamon-scented candles and freshly baked cookies, and the tree in the corner glittered with cheap but charming ornaments. It felt good to laugh and catch up after such a weird, isolating year. About an hour in, the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen refilling the punch bowl and shouted for someone to get it. A moment later, my friend Mia poked her head in and said, "Hey, there's a guy here. Is he a friend of yours?" I frowned as I wiped my hands on a dish towel. "What guy?" "I don't know," she replied with a shrug. "He's standing by the door. Says he heard about the party and wanted to stop by." I walked into the living room and saw a man I had never seen before, standing awkwardly near the door and holding a little gift bag. He looked to be in his late 30s, definitely older than anyone there, and his outfit, a faded sweater and jeans, didn't exactly scream holiday spirit. "Hi," I said, trying to sound friendly but firm. "Can I help you?" He smiled. "I heard about the party and thought I'd drop in. It is Christmas after all." I shot a quick look at Alex, who had wandered over to see what was going on. "Sorry, man, this is more of a private thing, just close friends." He didn't lose his smile for a second. "That's fine," he said, stepping a little farther inside. "I won't be any trouble. I'll just stay for a bit." Alex moved to block his way. "Look, this isn't okay," he said. "You need to leave." The man's expression darkened. "It's Christmas," he repeated, this time with an edge in his voice. "People shouldn't be left out this time of year." The room went quiet. Mia hovered near the hallway, eyes wide, and a couple of other friends stood frozen, unsure what to do. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I think you should go," I said, stepping a little closer. "I'll have to call someone if you don't." The man's grin returned, though it looked forced now. "No need," he said, stepping back just a fraction. "I'm going. I just wanted to spread a little Christmas cheer." He turned and walked out the door, but not before giving me a long, unsettling look that made my skin prickle. I threw the deadbolt and turned to my friends. "What the hell was that?" I muttered. "So weird," Mia said, crossing her arms. "Do you think he's gone?" Alex peeked through the curtains. "I don't see him, but we should keep an eye out." We tried to shake off the bad vibe and get back into the spirit, but the mood had shifted. Conversations dropped to a hush, and even the slightest noise put everyone on edge. About 30 minutes later, I went to the hallway closet for another pack of napkins and froze. The man had come back. He was in the yard, just beyond the glow of the Christmas lights, staring straight at the house. I rushed to close the curtain and grab my phone. "He's outside," I whispered to Alex, who immediately stood up and headed for the door. "Don't go out," I said, stopping him. "I'm calling the police." The dispatcher took my information and assured me someone would come soon. Meanwhile, the man stayed there, not moving, his silhouette barely visible through the glass fogged by the cold. Minutes stretched like hours. For a moment, I thought he had left, but then I saw him circling around the side of the house. My stomach dropped as I realized he was checking the windows. Alex and I locked every door and window, double-checking them, while the tension in the living room became unbearable. "What does he want?" Mia whispered. "I don't know," I said, "but we're not letting him in." When the flashing lights finally appeared, the man ran. He disappeared into the shadows of the neighborhood, And by the time the officers knocked on the door, he was gone. I told them everything. They took my statement and did a quick sweep of the area, but they didn't find him. "We'll keep an eye out," one of the officers said. "It's not unusual for strangers to crash parties this time of year. People let their guard down during the holidays." The gathering wrapped up shortly after. My friends left in groups, all on edge as they walked to their cars. Alex stayed over, insisting he didn't feel right leaving me alone. I appreciated the company, but we barely slept. The next morning, I found footprints in the snow around the house. They traced the living room windows and stopped at the back door before heading into the woods behind the property. It was clear the man had been watching us longer than we thought. I've hosted a few get-togethers since then, but now the doors stay locked, guest lists are strict, and I don't hesitate to ask for help if something gives me a bad feeling. Story 2. Working in retail during the holidays is like diving into a whirlwind of cheerful chaos. Crowds of shoppers, carols blaring, and decorations jumping out at you. It's all part of the season. I was an assistant manager at a small boutique in Atlanta, right in the heart of one of the city's busiest malls. I had always loved the energy of the holidays, even if it was exhausting. But last Christmas changed forever how I felt about the season and my job. It was December 2021, in the middle of the holiday rush. The mall was packed as usual, with shoppers going from store to store, arms loaded with bags. Our boutique specialized in trendy, affordable clothing, so we were swamped with last-minute gift hunters. My shift that Friday started at noon and stretched into the night. I'd barely had a chance to sit all day. Around 6 p.m., while I was ringing up a customer, I noticed a man standing near the fountain, right in front of our store. He wasn't shopping or browsing. He was just standing there, hands buried in the pockets of a dark coat. At first, I didn't think much of it. Plenty of people wait for friends or family at the mall, especially by the fountain. But something about him caught my attention. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, eyes fixed in my direction, unblinking, like he was watching me a little too closely. I shook off the thought and went back to helping customers. By the time I looked up again, he was gone, and I convinced myself I'd imagined the stare. The store was too busy for me to dwell on it. As the evening wore on, the crowds began to thin. The day's chaotic energy faded, and all that remained was the occasional jingle of a Salvation Army bell near the entrance. I was restocking shelves when I saw him again. This time he was by the entrance to our store, pretending to look at a display of scarves, but his eyes kept drifting back to me. He wasn't shopping. He was clearly lurking. I told myself it probably wasn't anything. Maybe he was waiting for someone, or maybe he really did like the scarves. Still, as the minutes passed, his presence became harder to ignore. I mentioned it to my coworker, Ella, who was helping a customer nearby. "That guy keeps hanging around," I said under my breath, gesturing toward the entrance. She glanced over. "He's probably just killing time. If he does anything weird, tell me." I focused on pushing aside the unease fogging my head, but as the night went on, it only got worse. Every time I looked toward the entrance, he was still there. Sometimes he pretended to look at another store. Other times he stood in the middle of the hallway, staring directly at me. At one point, I went into the stockroom to grab more items for the display racks. When I came out, Ella was at the register ringing up the last customer in line. "He's gone," she said when she saw my worried expression. Maybe he finally left. But when I walked over to the entrance to adjust a mannequin, I looked out into the mall and froze. There he was again, standing by the fountain like before, watching me. I decided to ignore him. If he wanted to stand there all night, that was his business. I finished what I was doing and went back to the register to help Ella close, but a cold rush of dread whispered in the back of my mind, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. When the store closed at 9 p.m., I felt relieved. Ella offered to walk out with me, but I didn't want to make a fuss over nothing. "I'll be fine," I said. "It's probably nothing." Big mistake. The parking lot was nearly empty when I walked out. My car was parked in one of the darker areas, near the mall's back exit. It had seemed like a good spot earlier, but now the shadows felt suffocating. The air was cold, my breath visible as I hurried across the lot, clutching my purse tightly. Halfway to the car, I heard footsteps behind me. I told myself it was another shopper heading to their vehicle, but the steps didn't fade. They stayed steady, keeping pace with mine. My heart started to beat faster. I gripped my purse and picked up speed, scanning the rows of cars for anyone else. The place was deserted. When I reached my car, I fumbled with the keys. The footsteps, closer now, thudded in my ears in time with my pulse. I turned, and there he was, the man from the mall. He was only a few feet away, hands still in his coat pockets and a smile plastered on his face. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said. "I just wanted to say hello." "Hi," I replied, my voice shaking. "Can I help you?" He took a step toward me. "You seem nice. I thought you might like some company." I stepped back. "No, thank you. I'm fine." "Come on, it's Christmas. You shouldn't be out here alone." "I'm fine," I repeated, more firmly this time. "You should leave." He didn't move for a moment. We stared at each other, the tension thick between us. Then, without thinking, I pressed the panic button on my key fob. The car horn blared through the parking lot. The sound startled him. He muttered something unintelligible and turned away, walking quickly toward the mall entrance. I didn't wait to see where he went. I got into the car and hit the locks. My hands were shaking so badly it was hard to start the engine. Instead of driving straight home, I went back to the mall and parked near the security office. The guards took me seriously when I told them what had happened. Within minutes, they sent someone to check the parking lot, and they found him lingering near the entrance. When they brought him to the office, he was back to smiling, insisting he hadn't done anything wrong. "I was just being friendly," he said. "It's Christmas, for God's sake." But his behavior told another story. The way he had followed me, the insistence in his voice. It wasn't friendliness, it was unsettling. The guards escorted him out of the mall and warned him not to return. I spoke with my manager to start my vacation a little early. I didn't want to go back to work, and when I finally did, I made sure never to be alone during my shifts. Ella and I started walking each other to our cars every night, just in case. I still can't walk through a crowded mall without thinking of that man. The holidays, which used to be my favorite time of year, now carry a slight air of anxiety and tension because sometimes, even in the brightest, most cheerful places, darkness finds a way to slip in. Story 3. Being a professional driver means I spend most of my days sitting in traffic, weaving through congested streets, and dealing with impatient people. By the time the weekend arrives, I crave silence and open spaces. That's why I've developed the habit of going hiking on my days off. It's a kind of therapy. It clears my mind and gives me back a sense of balance. Christmas morning of 2022 began like any other day off. I didn't have to be at my sister's place until the afternoon, so I figured I'd use the morning to hike a trail outside Anchorage that I'd been meaning to explore. I packed my backpack with the essentials: water, a thermos of coffee, a protein bar, and my trusty camera, and hit the road. The weather was perfect for a winter hike. Bright, crisp, and cold, with that fresh snow that blankets the world in silence. When I got to the trailhead, my car was the only one in the parking lot. That's one of the reasons I love hiking on Christmas morning. Most people are at home, and I have the trail to myself. The snow was untouched, and the air so still it felt like the forest had paused time itself. I tightened my boots, adjusted my gloves, and started walking. The trail wound through a dense spruce forest, the branches heavy with snow. I stopped here and there to take photos. The way the sunlight filtered between the trees was stunning. The silence calmed me, and I found myself thinking how lucky I was to have that moment of peace. Everything about that morning felt perfect, until I heard the laughter. At first, it barely rose above the crunch of my boots in the snow. I stopped. It sounded like a child's laughter. Light, airy. I looked around, expecting to see a family hiking nearby, but the trail was empty. The snow was pristine, with no tracks except mine. I ignored it and kept going. Sound travels strangely in the forest, and it was probably a hiker in the distance, or maybe an animal. I'm no expert on Alaskan wildlife, but I'd heard some animals can make sounds that mimic humans. Still, there was something about that laughter that didn't sit right with me. I continued, trying to push it out of my head. The path narrowed, threading into the heart of the dense trees, their snow-laden branches arching over me like a tunnel. The laughter came again, closer this time. I froze. "Hello," I called out, my voice slicing through the silence. Nothing. Only the wind in the trees. The unease grew. I scanned the forest. No sign of anyone, no tracks veering off the trail. I told myself it was my imagination, a trick of the mind in the stillness of the woods. I tried to focus on the beauty around me, snapping a few more photos to distract myself. But the laughter didn't stop. It followed me as I walked, sometimes faint and distant, other times sharp and close, as if someone were right behind me. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, but every time I stopped to listen, the sound stopped too. It was as if whoever or whatever was making it didn't want to be found. I reached a small clearing where the trees opened onto a frozen pond. It was breathtaking, like something you'd see on a Christmas card. I set my backpack down and took out the camera, trying to focus on capturing the moment. But the laughter was still there, bouncing around the clearing. "All right, who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking just a little. The laughter cut off instantly. The silence was immediate and absolute. The back of my neck prickled. I scanned the trees, heart pounding, and then I saw a shadow move between the trunks on the other side of the pond. It was very quick, but enough to spike my adrenaline. I grabbed my backpack and started back the way I'd come, picking up my pace with every step. The laughter returned, louder now, echoing from all directions. It wasn't playful anymore. It was mocking, taunting, like whoever, or whatever, was making it was enjoying my fear. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it had to be some kids playing a prank. But what truly froze my blood was that there were no other footprints in the snow. Whoever was out there wasn't walking along the trail. The return felt longer. My nerves had me looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone or something following me. The forest began to feel like a trap. When I finally reached the parking lot, I was out of breath and sweating despite the cold. My car was still the only one there. I tossed my backpack onto the back seat and jumped in, locking the doors immediately. For a moment I sat there staring at the trailhead. And then I saw it again. A shadow moving between the trees. It was too far away to make out details, but it was enough to make my hands shake as I fumbled with the keys. When I got home, I went through the photos on my camera, hoping to find something or someone in the background. But there was nothing out of the ordinary. Just the serene beauty of the forest. I tried to tell myself it had all been in my head, a combination of the stillness and my imagination. But something inside me told me otherwise. Story 4. I hadn't planned to spend Christmas Eve alone, but after a silly argument with my mom, I decided I needed space. The usual chaos of a family Christmas wasn't worth the stress this year. Instead, I stayed in my little house in Albany, planning a cozy evening with hot chocolate, a stack of Christmas movies, and the soft glow of my Christmas tree. The snowstorm outside only added to the comfortable atmosphere, and I allowed myself to enjoy the silence. By 10 p.m., I was already halfway through my second movie, wrapped in a fleece blanket and savoring the calm. It was the kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Then someone knocked at the door. It was a sharp blow that jolted me out of my relaxed state. I looked at the clock. It was past midnight. My first thought was that it might be one of my neighbors, but who would be outside in this weather? I set down my mug and shuffled to the door, more annoyed than anything. I peered through the peephole, expecting to see someone asking for help or delivering a misdirected package. Instead, I saw him, a man dressed as Santa in a red suit and a slightly crooked fake beard, standing motionless on my porch. His head was tilted slightly as if waiting for me to respond. The porch light cast strange shadows across his face, making it hard to read his expression. "Who is it?" I asked in a voice that sounded firmer than I felt. He leaned toward the door, brushing the frame with his gloved hand. "I'm Santa," he said, with an unsettling calm. "I came to deliver your presents." "You've got the wrong house," I replied. "No," he shot back, almost cheerful. "This is the right house." That was enough. I stepped back from the door as my heart started to race. I didn't like the way he said it, the certainty in his tone. I stood there, not quite sure what to do, when another knock came, harder this time. I looked through the peephole again. He was still there, staring straight at the door. "Let me in," he asked, his voice now deeper. I didn't answer. I threw the deadbolt and backed up farther as I grabbed my phone. The knocking started again, harder and more frantic, and then it stopped. I tiptoed to the living room window and pulled the curtain aside just a little to peek out. The porch was empty. The man in the Santa suit was gone, but something didn't add up. I scanned the snowy street for footprints, but the storm was covering everything too quickly. My breath caught as I tried to calm myself, convincing myself he had left. Maybe it was a weird prank, or maybe he had really mixed up the address. Either way, I wasn't going to let it ruin my night. I secured the windows and doors, double-checked the back door, and went back to the couch. An hour passed. I tried to focus on the movie, but my eyes kept drifting to the windows. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that my imagination was getting the better of me. Then I heard a scraping sound, like something brushing along the side of the house. I muted the TV and strained to listen. The sound came again, as if someone were dragging something along the exterior wall. I went still, my pulse pounding in my ears. I crept toward the window and peeked out again. Nothing. The empty porch and the snowy street, as peaceful as ever. But the noise didn't stop. It shifted toward the back near the kitchen. A different kind of fear washed over me as I tiptoed toward the kitchen. Now I could hear distant footsteps, the crunch of snow just outside the window. My hand was on the light switch, but I didn't turn it on. Instead, I crouched and looked through the gap in the curtains. There he was, the man in the Santa suit in my backyard. My breath caught at the sight of that fake beard. He was just standing there, as if waiting for something. I jerked back, clapping a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. My phone was still on the couch, but I couldn't move. The footsteps resumed. I heard him come back toward the front door. Then another series of knocks. 3 sharp raps just like before. "Let me in," he said, his voice muffled but still calm. I grabbed a kitchen knife and backed into the hallway. The knocking turned into pounding, each impact making the door rattle. "Let me in," he shouted now, angry, sharp, commanding. I ran to the living room, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911 with trembling hands. The operator answered, and stammering, I explained what was happening. She assured me they would send help immediately and asked me to stay on the line. Then the back door shook. I whipped around, gripping the knife tighter. The man was trying the handle, yanking it violently. "I just want to deliver your presents," he sing-songed in an almost musical tone. "Don't you want your presents?" "Go away now," I shouted. "The police are on their way." The rattling stopped for a moment. Only the wind howled outside. I stood rigid in the middle of the living room. The operator stayed on the line, assuring me the patrol cars were close. I didn't move until I saw the red and blue lights flashing through the front window. The police arrived minutes later and swept the property with flashlights. They found footprints around the house and leading into the backyard, but they didn't find the man. The snowfall was already starting to cover the tracks, making them impossible to follow. The officers told me I'd done the right thing by calling and assured me they would patrol the area for the rest of the night. But their words didn't erase the image of the man standing in my yard or the sound of the door shaking. I packed a suitcase and went to my parents' house the next morning. The fight with my mom no longer mattered. The only thing I wanted was to feel safe. Now I can't look at a Santa suit without thinking of that night. If these chilling holiday tales made you rethink the festive spirit, don't forget to give a like and subscribe for more stories that will give you goosebumps. Have you ever had a Christmas encounter that was more nightmare than Wonderland? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to read it. Send this video to that friend who thinks Santa is the only one who comes down the chimney. I wish you a Christmas full of warmth, joy, and just the right dose of shivers to keep it exciting. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next nightmare.